Have you ever felt the cold blade of underestimation cut through your confidence, leaving behind a wound that bleeds invisibly? It's a peculiar pain, I know, a silent kind of violence, which whispers to you that perhaps you are small, that you are insignificant, that the other is right to look at you as though you were less. And yet, I tell you, every time someone underestimates you, they are revealing far more about themselves than about you. For the act of underestimation is, first and foremost, a projection away the unconscious finds to rid itself of the discomfort it feels in the presence of your existence. I ask you now, intimately, when you feel underestimated, do you become small, as if trying to fit into the narrow space the other grants you? Or does something inside you rebel, longing to prove your worth, to shout, I am not who you think I am? Ah, therein lies the snare. For the moment you rush to prove yourself, you have already become the prisoner of their gaze. Your ego has fused with the need to be seen, recognized, validated. You are no longer free. You are performing. Let me confess a secret from my consulting room. People who underestimate others are almost always haunted by their own sense of inadequacy. They cannot tolerate their hidden envy, nor the silent suspicion that you might possess something they lack, an intelligence, a resilience, an authenticity. To soothe their inner chaos, they reduce you to something less. It is their way of restoring balance in a psyche tormented by comparison. Thus, when someone underestimates you, it is not you they are diminishing, but a phantom of you they have constructed in their mind. They speak not to your essence, but to their own fears. The truly wise response is not retaliation, nor protest, but observation. You must become, as I might say, the psychoanalyst of the moment, witnessing rather than reacting. For when you react, you play the part assigned to you in their inner drama. When you witness, you retain your power. Let me give you an image. Imagine your sense of self as a vast ocean. When a stone of contempt is thrown into it, it creates ripples on the surface. But deep beneath, the ocean remains unshaken, immense, silent. Your task is to descend into those depths where the words cannot reach. From there, you may look back at the ripple and see it for what it is, a fleeting disturbance in the surface, nothing more. This is not weakness. It is strength of the highest order. For the ego, when healthy, knows that its value is not determined by the eyes of others. This is why, in my writings, I spoke of the boundary between ego and external world. Yet even those boundaries can sometimes dissolve, particularly under the influence of love or rage or humiliation. In such moments, the self feels threatened. You may experience a primitive surge of fury or shame. This is the ID surging forth, demanding satisfaction. The superego, meanwhile, may berate you. You must prove yourself, or you are worthless. And the ego trembles between these forces. But remember, you are not your rage. You are not your shame. Those are merely energies moving through you. Observe them. Let them rise. Let them fall. And when you speak, speak from clarity, not from compulsion. So how shall you respond to one who underestimates you? Perhaps with words as simple as, I hear your opinion, nothing more. Or perhaps with silence, which often speaks louder than any defense. Silence unsettles those who seek to diminish you, for they expect resistance, or an apology, or a desperate attempt at validation. Instead, you offer them the vacuum of your indifference, a mirror in which they are forced to see themselves. In Civilization and its discontents, I reflected on how men pursue power, success, and wealth, believing these things to grant them value, while they scorn the subtle qualities that truly give life meaning. It is precisely these subtle qualities, depth, introspection, resilience, that threaten the shallow soul. Your wisdom, your quiet force, your refusal to enter the theater of their projections. These are what will ultimately protect you. There is, too, an erotic dimension to being underestimated. Do not dismiss this, for when someone underestimates you, they create an imbalance, a tension that can sometimes awaken the desire to seduce, to captivate, to subjugate them with proof of your worth. Beware this impulse, for it is merely another form of bondage. The true seduction lies in being unbothered, in dwelling in your own mystery. Consider this. The less you explain yourself, the more power you wield. Mystery is intolerable to those who seek certainty. It provokes curiosity, respect, sometimes even fear. Why do you think the unconscious so fascinates us? Because it is unknowable, and what is unknowable commands both reverence and dread. So, my invitation to you is this. The next time someone looks at you as though you are small, breathe deeply. Remember your ocean. Do not shrink. Do not roar. Simply remain. For the one who remains unmoved becomes the axis around which the others. Projections spin. And slowly, inevitably, those projections dissolve in the light of your calm. And now, before we continue, I have a question for you. The kind of question that opens secret doors in the mind. When was the first time you felt underestimated in your life? How old were you? Who was there? What did it awaken in you? For in that memory lies the root of the wound that still bleeds each time someone dares to look at you as though you are less. Search there. For the freedom you seek begins with that child who once believed he was not enough. When you explore the memory of the first time you were underestimated, you may discover that the pain you feel today is not entirely new. It is an echo, a repetition, of something older, something that took root in the fertile soil of your childhood. You see, the psyche is a vast archive of impressions. What you call the present is often nothing more than the unconscious replaying its oldest recordings. To understand why you feel so wounded by the contempt of others, you must trace the wound back to its origin. Perhaps, as a child, you approached someone you loved, your mother, your father, a teacher, with the tender offering of your creativity, your curiosity, your enthusiasm. And perhaps they looked away, distracted, or worse, they laughed. In that moment, something in you concluded, I am not worthy of attention. It is a belief so subtle, you may not even recognize it as a belief. It feels like a fact. It becomes a silent axiom around which your entire personality organizes itself. In my years of studying the unconscious, I learned that this kind of conclusion does not disappear simply because we grow older. It persists in the depths, hidden behind more sophisticated masks. Today, when someone underestimates you, the adult part of you may rationalize. They don't really know me, but the child within recoils, convinced that the old story is true. This is why your reactions can feel so disproportionate to the event. You are not only defending your present self, you are defending every younger version of you who felt unseen. I want you to consider this carefully. The compulsion to prove yourself is not born of strength, but of an ancient hunger. It is the hunger to be recognized, to be validated, to be loved without conditions. And when you give in to this hunger, when you rush to justify your worth to those who diminish you, you abandon yourself again, just as you were abandoned in those first moments of disappointment. This is the cycle I named the compulsion, too. Repeat. You reenact the original scenario, hoping that this time the ending will be different. But the ending does not change through repetition. It changes through awareness, through the slow, patient work of seeing clearly. That is why we are here, you and I, in this quiet space between my words and your listening. We are not looking for techniques to manipulate others into admiring you. We are looking for the deeper liberation that comes from no longer needing their admiration. Imagine, for a moment, a life in which you no longer feel compelled to defend yourself. A life in which you can simply observe others' opinions as expressions of their own limitations. This is the life of the integrated ego and ego that has learned to stand between the primitive impulses of the ID and the harsh judgments of the own superego, and to choose its response with intention. Recall that I once wrote where ID was, there ego shall be. In other words, the work of psychological growth is the work of illumination. You bring light into the dark corners where unexamined beliefs have hidden for decades. You reclaim the energy that has been trapped in old wounds. You transform the compulsion to react into the freedom to respond. Let me offer you an example, drawn from a composite of many patients who came to me seeking relief from the torment of feeling underestimated. A woman, accomplished in her field, found herself trembling whenever her superior dismissed her contributions in meetings. She would spend sleepless nights composing arguments in her head, rehearsing how she would confront him, prove him wrong, force him to acknowledge her value. When she finally brought this to our sessions, I asked her to describe the feeling in her body. She said it was as though her chest was collapsing inward, as though she was becoming invisible. We followed that sensation back to its source. And there, in the quiet memory of a classroom, she was 6 years old, raising her hand eagerly while her teacher ignored her again and again. The adult humiliation was merely the reactivation of that forgotten scene. And when she recognized this, when she saw the past superimposed onto the present, something loosened inside her. The next time her superior belittled her, she felt the old contraction, and then she breathed and allowed herself to remain silent. She discovered she did not need to convince him of anything. In her silence, she tasted a freedom she had never known. This is what I wish for you: the capacity to see when the past is masquerading as the present, the courage to remain in yourself, even when others attempt to pull you into their projections, the willingness to value your own perception more than their approval. I know that the desire to retaliate is strong. It feels like justice, doesn't it? To wound the one who wounded you. But retaliation is merely another chain binding you to their judgment. It keeps you in the same orbit of dependence. Far more radical is the decision to withdraw your energy entirely, to become immune to their estimation. That immunity is not indifference. It is sovereignty. When you cease to depend on others for confirmation, you begin to touch what I have called the oceanic feeling, a sense of vastness within, a sense that you are part of something infinitely larger than any opinion or judgment. This feeling does not arise through conquest, nor through applause. It arises in the quiet moments when you remember that your being is not negotiable. So now, I ask you again, who are you trying to prove yourself? T.O.? Whose gaze still has the power to shrink you? And when did you first decide that their approval was necessary for your existence? Let us not rush past these questions. They are the doorway to your liberation. If you feel the resonance of this inquiry, I invite you to pause this video and write down the names that surface in your mind. Look at them with clear eyes. Understand that every one of these names is a reflection of a dynamic you have the power to transcend. There is something almost intoxicating about the idea of finally saying the perfect words to silence those who have underestimated you. The mind rehearses speeches late at night, crafting flawless arguments, imagining the look of astonishment or shame on the other's face. I do not judge you for this. The longing for vindication is as human as the beating of the heart. But allow me to confess what I learned in the countless hours listening to human souls. No clever speech will ever quiet the wound that bleeds beneath the surface. For the wound is not in them, it is in you. It is the child in you who still believes that being underestimated is proof of being small, unworthy, invisible. Let me take you further into the mechanisms of your psyche. You see, when you are underestimated, it is not only an emotional injury, it is an event that threatens the structure of your ego. The ego is the seat of your self-image, the mediator between your inner world and the external reality. When someone diminishes you, It is as though they are chiseling cracks into the walls of your identity. Your first instinct may be to patch the crack quickly, to defend, to retaliate, to seek external reassurance that you are, indeed, enough. Yet, this frantic repair often strengthens the chains that bind you. For every time you rush to prove yourself, you confirm the hidden suspicion that the other person's opinion matters more than your own. This is why the path to freedom lies not in external victory, but in internal understanding. I have witnessed it over and over. Patients who believed they needed to change the minds of others, only to discover that the true transformation was to change the way they perceived themselves. Consider the superego, a voice within you that speaks in the language of judgment, morality, and criticism. It tells you, you must be respected. You must prove your worth. It shames you when others look at you with disdain. Yet the superego itself is not an evil force. It is built from the voices of authority figures, from your past parents, teachers, culture itself, who once dictated the terms of your acceptability. To be underestimated triggers not only humiliation, but a deep conflict between your superego and your ID. Your ID wants immediate satisfaction. It wants to roar, to lash out, to annihilate the source of humiliation. The superego, on the other hand, demands you uphold dignity, composure, respectability. Between these two forces stands your ego, trembling, uncertain whether to attack or to submit. But hear me carefully. A healthy ego does not attack nor submit. It observes, it evaluates. It chooses. In my clinical work, I found that the individuals who most frequently fell into destructive cycles of proving themselves were those whose childhoods were marked by conditional love. They learned that affection came only when they performed, excelled, pleased. When love becomes transactional, the child grows into an adult who believes that worth must always be demonstrated. This is why being underestimated is so devastating. It threatens to cancel the transaction. It suggests that no matter how hard you perform, you might still remain unseen. Let me share with you the case of a man who came to me in despair. He was a lawyer, highly respected, yet he could not bear it when colleagues interrupted him in meetings or dismissed his ideas. Each slight plunged him into obsessive rumination, composing scathing emails in his mind, imagining how he would expose their ignorance. When I asked him to tell me about his childhood, he described a father who demanded perfection and ridiculed any mistake. I felt like I was always auditioning, he said. I told him gently, "You are still auditioning." His silence in that moment was profound. For the first time, he saw that his rage toward his colleagues was not truly about them. It was about a child who had longed to hear, "You are enough, even when you fail." From that point forward, we worked not on clever comebacks, but on helping him anchor his self-worth internally. He learned to recognize when the child within him was pleading for validation. He practiced the radical act of pausing, breathing, and asking himself, is this really about now, or is this my past replaying itself? The practice of pausing is revolutionary. It is the first step in reclaiming your power. Instead of being swept into the tidal wave of reaction, you stand still and observe the wave as it passes. You realize you are not the wave. You are the ocean in which the wave rises and falls. There is another truth I must share, though it may sting. The more you crave the respect of others, the easier it is for them to manipulate you. People sense your hunger for validation and use it to control you. They know that by offering or withholding approval, they can pull the strings of your behavior. Thus, the cost of seeking constant recognition is not merely exhaustion, it is the surrender of your autonomy. Yet here is the paradox. When you cease needing others to see your value, they often begin to see it. Your detachment makes you mysterious. Your silence commands curiosity. You become, as I have often described, the unconscious, An enigma unknowable, fascinating, untouchable. So I ask you now, what would it feel like to walk through the world with no urge to justify yourself? Who might you become if you no longer needed to prove anything to anyone? Can you imagine speaking less, observing more, and allowing others' underestimation to reveal who they are, rather than allowing it to define who you are? Your challenge is to discover the place within you that remains untouched by praise or contempt. That place exists, I assure you. It is the core of your being, the essence that needs no external permission to exist. If you are willing, close your eyes as you listen. Feel your breath moving in and out, and ask yourself, who am I without my story of being underestimated? Who am I when I no longer fight for recognition? Who am I when I simply am? For it is in this state of pure being that you will discover the freedom for which you have always yearned. There is a certain tragedy in the way human beings measure their worth against the eyes of others. From childhood onward, we are conditioned to believe that the gaze of another person is a mirror reflecting our value. If they see us as brilliant, we feel brilliant. If they dismiss us, we feel diminished. But tell me, is your essence truly altered by the shifting clouds of someone else's perception? Or is the problem that you have confused who you are with who you imagine you must be in order to be loved? This confusion is not accidental. It is the product of years of unconscious training. As a child, perhaps you learned that smiles meant safety, approval meant affection, and disapproval meant abandonment. Your nervous system, still raw and open, etched these patterns into the flesh of your mind. And so, even now, as an adult, when someone underestimates you, your entire organism reacts as though your survival is at stake. But I must tell you a harsh and liberating truth. Underestimation cannot actually harm you unless you collaborate with it. It can wound your pride. Yes, it can bruise your vanity. But your true being remains untouched, for it was never built from other people's judgments. It existed before they spoke, and will exist long after their voices fall silent. The paradox is this: when you cease defending your worth, you finally inhabit it. The more you argue for your value, the more you imply it is negotiable. The more silent you become in the face of underestimation, the more others are forced to reckon with the possibility that you possess a depth they cannot fathom. Consider what happens in analysis when I sit silently while the patient searches for words. In that silence, something profound often emerges. The patient begins to hear themselves. The silence is not emptiness. It is space in which the unconscious can speak. So too with those who underestimate you. When you respond with calm silence, they are left alone with their projections, forced to confront the origins of their contempt. Sometimes they become uncomfortable. Sometimes they attempt to provoke you further. Let them. Your silence is a fortress. Let me illustrate with a fictional example, though drawn from countless true stories. Imagine a man, an artist, who shares his work at a gallery, proud yet vulnerable. A critic scoffs dismissively, saying, "This is amateurish. Nothing special." The artist feels the familiar surge of humiliation, the sting of being reduced. His mind floods with impulses to argue, to defend, to prove himself. But instead, he pauses. He notices the contraction in his chest. He hears the voice inside that says, "You're worthless," and recognizes it as an echo of childhood scorn. He breathes. He allows the critic's words to exist without resistance. And in that moment, he discovers something astonishing. The critic's words are merely sounds in the air. They hold no true power. Later, another viewer approaches him and says, "Your work moved me deeply." The artist smiles, accepting the compliment without clutching it for dear life. For he has begun to understand that neither praise nor contempt defines his worth. His art comes from a place deeper than approval. This is the kind of freedom I wish. For you, I have spoken often of the phenomenon I called the return of the repressed. What is repressed does not vanish. It returns in disguised forms. This is why the wound of underestimation keeps reappearing in your life, often in different faces, different situations. You may think this person is uniquely cruel, when in truth they are merely the latest actor in a drama written long ago. Until you recognize the script, you remain bound to it. Sometimes that script sounds like this: I must prove myself to be loved. Or, if I am underestimated, it means I am worthless. Or, my value depends on others acknowledging it. These are not truths. They are conclusions drawn in childhood, conclusions based on incomplete data. The work we do here is to examine these conclusions, to hold them up to the light, to ask, are they still true? Were they ever true? And who might you become if you no longer believe them? Understand this. Every act of underestimation you suffer is an opportunity, an invitation to see where you are still imprisoned by old stories. Instead of reacting automatically, you can choose curiosity. Why does this particular person's opinion matter so much to me? What part of me feels threatened? How old do I feel right now? What am I afraid will happen if I remain silent? These questions are keys. They open doors to the unconscious. I wish to remind you that the ultimate goal of analysis is not to become impervious to pain. Pain is part of existence. The goal is to become conscious, to see, to understand, to choose. You will still feel the sting when underestimated, but you will no longer confuse that sting with the entirety of who you are. Consider the ocean once. More, the waves crash above, tumultuous and loud. But deep below, there is silence, stillness, vastness. The one who learns to dwell in that depth can witness the storms above without being destroyed by them. Not now. I ask you to imagine a moment in your future. Someone underestimates you, a colleague, a stranger, perhaps even someone you love. Feel the initial surge of pain. Then feel yourself breathing, sinking into the depths. See yourself choosing not to respond from compulsion. Instead, you remain still. Perhaps you offer a gentle smile. Or perhaps you say, simply, thank you for your perspective. Feel the power in that simplicity. For in that moment, you are no longer a puppet dancing on the strings of others' judgments. You have become the puppeteer of your own fate. So I ask you once more, gently but firmly, who would you be if you no longer needed to prove your worth? Pause, if you wish. Reflect, for the answer to that question may be the beginning of your true liberation. There is a silence that is not emptiness, but presence. A silence that radiates certainty rather than doubt. It is the silence of the one who knows that their worth is not subject to negotiation. That, my friend, is the silence I wish for you. You may wonder, though, how do I arrive at such a silence when my mind rages with indignation, when my chest burns with the need to speak, to defend, to strike back? Let me tell you, the path to that silence is not repression, but understanding. When you repress your anger, it festers in the unconscious. It returns, disguised, seeking expression in sarcasm, bitterness, or self-sabotage. But when you allow yourself to feel your anger without acting it out, when you trace its origins, you transform it from a tyrant into a teacher dot in the interpretation of dreams. I described how the unconscious speaks in symbols. So too does your anger speak in symbols. When you feel underestimated and fury surges in you, ask yourself, what is this anger protecting? Often you will find it guards a softer feeling: humiliation, sorrow, fear. Beneath the desire to fight is the desire to be seen, to be known, to be loved as you truly are. This is why underestimation wounds so deeply. It implies that your true self is invisible or unworthy. But I tell you now, with the solemnity of all my years of listening. Your true self is neither invisible nor unworthy. It is merely hidden beneath layers of defenses you built to survive a world that did not always understand you. Each time someone underestimates you, it is a chance to excavate those layers, to remind yourself that the opinions of others are not sacred texts but human utterances, riddled with their own histories, wounds, and projections. There is a line I wrote in Beyond the Pleasure Principle. We are lived by unknown and uncontrollable forces. Indeed, you are driven by forces you do not fully see. But it is possible, through the work of analysis, to make the unconscious conscious, to recognize the forces that have been moving you like a puppet. Imagine the liberation that comes when you see your own strings and gently set them down. So, how do you respond with wisdom to those who underestimate you? Let me give you the answer as simply as I can. You respond by refusing to become smaller than you are. You respond by recognizing that underestimation says more about them than it does about you. You respond by observing your own reactions, tracing them to their origins, and choosing your actions from a place of freedom rather than compulsion. Sometimes you will speak. Sometimes you will remain silent. Both are valid when chosen from awareness rather than fear. You respond by ceasing to audition for approval. You respond by understanding that your value is intrinsic, immutable, and independent of the fickle tides of others' perceptions. This, I must tell you, is not merely psychological advice. It is the path to psychic sovereignty. It is the path to becoming, finally, the author of your own existence. Let me leave you with an image. Picture a vast library filled with books, each containing judgments about who you are. Some say you are brilliant. Some say you are worthless. Some say you are lovable. Some say you are not enough. For years, you have wandered these aisles, reading these books, trying to decide which one tells the truth. Today, I invite you to step out of that library. Close its doors. Leave its dust and its echoes behind. Go stand beneath the open sky. Feel the breeze. Hear your own heartbeat. Remember that who you are is written nowhere but in the silent truth of your own being. You need no one's permission to exist. You need no one's validation to be worthy. You are not defined by who underestimates you. You are defined by who you choose to become when faced with underestimation. And so I ask you, finally, one last question, the most important question of all. Who are you when no one is watching? It is there, in that secret self, that your freedom waits. If this conversation has opened something within you, I invite you not merely to reflect, but to act. Leave me a comment below, if you wish, sharing the earliest memory you have of being underestimated. Or tell me how you plan to remain anchored in yourself the next time someone tries to make you small. Your words may become a lighthouse for others adrift in the same storm. Remember, you are not the judgment cast upon you. You are the vast, unfathomable ocean beneath every wave. And now, my friend, our session comes to a close. I thank you for your courage in accompanying me so far. Go forth with your head held high, carrying the silence of one who knows their worth. And should you wish to continue this journey of discovery together, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, where we shall keep exploring the mysterious depths of your own mind. Until then, remain vigilant, remain compassionate, and above all, remain yourself.